To Sydney. Okay, so as everyone knows, tonight is first night Rosh Chodesh, or second night Rosh Chodesh.
First night.
Today was first day, now it's second night.
Oh, yeah, first day.
And just so that you know, just so that we regroup on where we are in our spiritual calendar. I said last week when we did the Maimah on Mayim Rabim that we Jews live a life which has various cycles, spiritual cycles, and last week we did in general the concept of Golus and Geula and exile and redemption, and how the whole of the year is exile and redemption, goes from Elul through Tishrei, and we did the mechanics of some of that last week. So I want to continue that this week with a very famous Maimah, which I'll try and summarize some of. I'll explain why only some of it in a minute. But before we start, the reason that it's very common in Chabad circles to learn this, what we're going to be learning tonight, or around what we're learning tonight, is because we have this fundamental concept, and I never stop to marvel at how the Hashgacha process of learning works, and every time this chit-chat before the shiur, somehow or other, it's incredible how it finds its way into what the shiur was really going to be about in the first place. But somebody was saying before the shiur that, you know, we need unity in Israel, and if we don't have unity in Israel, we are exposed to all sorts of negative influences. So I just remind everybody that in our Siddur, in the Tchilas Hashem Siddur, which was put together by the Alter Rebbe, we start the morning davening with the words Hareni Makabel Olam Mitzvahs Aseh Shel Ve'ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha, that we accept upon ourselves the mitzvah of loving a fellow Jew like oneself. And why do we say that before we start the davening? Because we learn that the gateway to God's heart is through our unity. If we bring ourselves to loving our fellow Jew better, then our opportunity for contact and production with our God is better. Now, just as that's true with davening, it's true with our gashmius brachas. In other words, we have brachas which are ruchnius and brachas which are gashmius. We have blessings, but in terms of our physical blessings which I remind you are money, health, and nachas from our children. Those blessings which we all aspire to in the month of Tishrei and prepare for in the month of Elul, as we're going to see in the next few weeks in the Shurim, that dynamic of wanting increased brachas comes from an increase in a focus of loving one's fellow Jew like himself, and we'll explore that in a minute. Now, the flip side to that, the reverse side to that, is that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of idol worship, and the Golus that Am Yisrael had after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash was 70 years. So the punishment, in inverted commas, for Avodah Zarah was 70 years. The destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash was because of what's called sinas chinom. Sinas chinom means baseless, causeless hatred. And the golus that we've endured as a result of that is thousands of years. So it is common in Chabad to review Sinas Chinom before Elul gets underway. And that's what we're going to do tonight. I'll just give you some background on the sources for this. Can I put that there? That's out of the way. The primary source of this is a mimer called Chachalzu by the Alter Rebbe, and I won't refer to it much. It's the mothership mimer. It should be learned by every Jew at some time in his life, and many times. I mentioned the other day, I repeated the Hayoim Yoim that says that there were certain Maimorim that the Rebbeim used to say to clean the air. The one from the Alter Rebbe was this one of Chachalzu. He said it the first time when he was little more than a teenager, and then he said it many times over his lifetime. And to say that it's revolutionary at the time is probably a very big understatement. But a lot of it is cryptic, and so as a result, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, the father of the Frierdiker Rebbe, wrote a mimer called Chachalzu in the same name, and that mimer is 32 chapters long. And I'm going to try and summarize some of it to you tonight. Some of it some of you may be familiar with, certainly some of the concepts. But I just want to explain this for the people who, to save the emails tomorrow, there are one or two people who listen to this who know how to learn. And I just make the point that I acknowledge that about half of this mimer, let me explain this. I'm going to read you a pasuk which says that Hashem says to Moshe, make war on Midian. I'll explain this in a minute. And when you've done that, you can die. In other words, Moshe's life is perfected by bringing war against Midian. So, and then in that pasuk, it says a very strange thing. It says that you have to make war on Midian in order to revenge Am Yisrael. And then at the end of the pasuk it says, in order to revenge Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Havaya. And the first thing that the Rebbe Rashab starts with, and the Alter Rebbe started with in the Mothership Mimer, is why is there a shift in description of bringing this war for revenge for Am Yisrael or revenge for Hashem? So I'm going to just explain this, that half of this mimer is on the revenge for Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and it's too complicated for us for tonight, and it doesn't have the same practical significance as the other half of the mimer. The other current in the mimer is the one that says that you have to do this in order to bring revenge for Am Yisrael. That's what we're going to be concentrating. I'm just explaining that because otherwise I will be criticized for only doing a part of the mimer. We can't do it all in one night if I do both sides. I don't know if we can do justice to the one side, but certainly it'll be much more meaningful. And many of these inyonim I'm sure you've heard anyway. So let's start from the beginning. The pasuk says that, I won't go through in the original, the pasuk says that Hashem tells Moshe to make war on Midian, and then he'll be gathered to his people, then he'll die. So we're going to be learning that Midian is a separate, completely vile clipper. It's the clipper of division, pirud. argument, an inability for one man to get along with another. And the mimer will explain to you and me why that happens to you and me. And you'll recognize when the Rebbe explains this, that this is really the root cause of all our difficulty with one another. And so we'll come back to that. But let's start with the positive. Just before we get to the mimer, let's deal with what we say in the Siddur, because as that's our entry for our prayers, we're entering Elul for Tishrei. We want brachas of money, children, and health. And the positive side of that is the Siddur explains that we have to love our fellow Jew like oneself. And so the famous questions, and I won't spend too long on it because I really want to do the mimer on the negative side of causeless hatred. But the usual questions that are asked in wonder at this mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew like yourself is, how can you? How can you love another person like you love yourself? And what about if that person is behaving in a way which is an antithesis to your liking him? You don't like him. And the word neighbor is very carefully chosen because it's much more difficult to love the guy who lives next door, who is treading on your toes and inconveniencing you and playing music till the middle of the night and shouting at his kids getting in your way, and all the things, not putting out his garbage, not taking in his garbage, leaving his car parked across your driveway. All of that stuff he's very difficult to like. He's your neighbor. So, as I said, we won't spend long on it, but it's very interesting that numerology of this, the mimer that we're going to be learning, Chaltzu, has 32 chapters. 32 is Lamed Beis, means lave, heart. The chapter in the Tanya, which answers the question of how you can love your neighbor like yourself, is chapter 32. Again, same thing. There are no accidents in this. These Rebbeim are geniuses, Shabbat geniuses, and this is all very carefully calculated. So, very simply, the answer that the Alter Rebbe gives in Tanya is, try and understand that the man's made up of Gashmias and Ruchnias. He's got a body and a soul. What you object to is his body, his behavior. And what you, instead of focusing on his body and his behavior, if you focus on the fact that he's got a neshama and you've got a neshama, and both are a Helek Elohika Mimal, part of God himself, you'll realize that he is, in fact, spiritually and actually your brother. And if he's your brother, you cut him slack. You cut him slack differently than if he's a stranger. And because he's your brother, you try and understand him better. And in order to try and understand him better, you understand that he's had a different Ashkoka Protest than you, he's had a different talent set than you, and maybe he's doing the best he can with what he's got and what's coming upon him. Then his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, takes this a step further and says, what is it? That's how you can love your neighbor. But what about as yourself? How do you do that? So he explains that what that means is that when you do something wrong, when I do something wrong, and it's pointed out to us in a way which is not offensive, but constructive, you see the value, you see that you've done wrong, but you don't beat yourself up about it forever. You say, yeah, I did wrong, okay, but God will forgive me. I've done wrong, yeah, so I'm human. What can I do? I didn't realize, I didn't know, I didn't realize, I didn't know, whatever it is. And you make excuses for yourself. Tzemach Tzedek says, the mitzvah is that you got to make the same excuses for your fellow Jew. the same excuses you make for yourself, and you don't beat yourself up for the rest of your life. You don't do that to a fellow Jew. Whereas that's not what happens. You know, you have a Jew and another Jew have an argument, and one says, "I hate you," and he means it, and they never invite each other to their bar mitzvahs, and they never, and even if they end up at the Levi, they won't go over and console each other. So the positive mitzvah is, and this is a whole shir on, it's a chapter of Tanya, and it's a whole shir on its own. I'm just skipping through it for the sake of completeness, because I want to do the mimer on the reverse. But the positive mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew is by trying to understand his spiritual position rather than his physical position. And you know, it's amazing how powerful that can be. For example, nowadays with Zoom and so on the internet, it didn't have, but everybody will remember when there were chat rooms, right? You remember when there were chat rooms? Yeah. And you never met the person in the chat room, you never saw them, because there wasn't a photographic component to that. So all you saw was the writing. And you know, people fell in love in chat rooms. People left their wives and husbands and went to the other end of the earth to meet and to hook up with people that they met in chat rooms. How come? Because it was nefesh to nefesh. It was a person's soul to a person's soul. And the body just wasn't getting in the way. So that's the way the Alter Rebbe instructs one to train oneself, and it's a matter of training. It doesn't come naturally, it doesn't come easily. And Tzemach Tzedek explains that to love that person like yourself, you have to make the same allowances for him as you would for yourself. That's also a matter of training, but that's how to do it. And we know from the deepest levels of Kabbalah and from also the Midrash that the keys to God's heart comes through this level of unity which is achieved like this. And if you want better brachas, or let's say you're davening, you daven every day, you want your davening to come true, this is the gateway. That's why we start the thing with that. But now I want to learn with you the Maimah Chechaltzu and L'chaim. So the Maimah says this, starts off with this proposition. There are 7 levels of evil emotion in other people which affect you. And they're specific. Those 7 levels are specific, and we, Am Yisrael, is enjoined to fight those 7 nations, conquer them, and expel them from Eretz Canaan, making Eretz Yisrael. This is all code. There are 7 levels of emotion which are bad, and they need conquest. And having conquested that, you have clean, kodesh living space. But that is not the Klippa of Midian. The Klippa of Midian, which comes from the Hebrew word modoin, which means dispute, is a general Klippa. It's very important to understand this at the beginning of the Maimah. It's a general Klippa. It's all persuasive. It's not limited to one of the special 7 emotions. It's not limited to anger or to infidelity or to theft or murder, or these are all specific sins and specific negative pathways against Ratzon Hashem. When we're talking about the Klippa of Midian, we're talking about a general disease, and that general disease we're going to learn comes from pirud. Pirud means division. Just as somebody said before when the shir started, we don't access God well when we don't have unity. The reverse is a stronger statement, and it's one that needs to be really understood, that when you introduce pirud, division, you are introducing a negative energy which kills your brachas. It just negates them. And this, so there's tons of code for this in Torah. Let me give you an example. When we start the first psukim in Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'es, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and on the first day Hashem created light, right? On the second day he created a division between the upper waters and the lower waters. On the first day he gives a bracha to the day. So he saw that it was good. Right? Kitov, that's what it says. What does good mean? It's a technical meaning of it, that it has inherent godliness. That's what the word kitov means. On the second day, when he created division, there's no expression kitov. On the third day, when there is a peace brought between the division, the word kitov is said twice. Why? Because right from baby steps, we are invited to understand that division on its own is bad. Rationalizing division so that there's shalom, and you can't have shalom from one. From one you have unity. From one you have aloneness. Unity comes from the melding of various differences. So differences are not klippa on their own, because they're potential for shalom. Shalom is so nothing that God creates is inherently bad. It's only bad in certain aspects. So division is bad if it's not used to bring shalom. But if it's used to bring shalom, it's the greatest energy in the world. That's what tshuva is. We're going to come to that during the month of Elul and Tishrei. But in the meantime, it's necessary to understand that on its own, division, pirud, argument for argument's sake, that's going nowhere, that isn't a pathway to shalom, that is a negative. And not only is it a negative, it's a disease. And it's the klippa of Midian. This is what the very klippa of Midian was, that it was pirud, that it was argument, that it was divisiveness. As opposed to the kedusha of peace, of harmony, of mutual understanding, of mutual help. This is kedusha. I'm sure I might have mentioned this last week, or maybe if I bring it in Melbourne. We have all of Torah's one, and it depends which pasuk you look at. And if you're a Rebbe and you're a genius, you can see it in everything. I'm repeating our Rebbe who's a genius. So in relation to this concept, which we're going to learn as we're learning in Chachaltzu, of this business of division being division for its own sake, or being shalom and a unification. So we have Yaakov and Esau, two brothers, twin brothers, right? One's bad, one's good. When Yaakov says, Yesh li koil, I have everything, right? Esav says, Yesh li Rav. Same thing. He's saying the same thing, but he's saying something completely different. With Yaakov, he has all. With Esav, he has plenty, all separate, all different. Most people sadly live their lives tied up with all the differences. And that's a dead end. It's a diseased end. What we learn in Chassidus specifically from this Maimah is that's the clipper of Midian. We'll learn how we have to work with that in a minute. Now, the Maimah then goes off on a tangent and talks about the problems that has with Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei and Shem Elokim. We haven't got the room to do that tonight, but then it comes back to this question of division and pirud amongst Jews. Now, what comes from this pirud, explains the Rebbe Rashab, is strife, argument, disagreement, bickering, fighting. And that fighting, the Rebbe explains, which is counterintuitive. You think that that's because you're dealing with someone who's a negative person or evil to you or doing you bad. Explains the Alter Rebbe in the original Maimah, and this is picked up and explained to a much greater extent by the Rebbe Rashab in the Maimah we're learning together tonight, is that this general pirud spawns causeless hatred. And what is spawning that causeless hatred? So let me explain that. The first assertion is that when you hate somebody, most of the time, there's no reason. You think there's a reason, but there isn't. I'm going to explain what that means. What is it then that makes you hate them? It's yeshus. Your yeshus. Yeshus, I don't know how to explain in English. It means arrogance, it means self-centeredness, it means selfishness. I think one of the best words for it is narcissism. We're all, to the extent that everybody has a level of narcissism in them, this is the evil we're talking about. And in Torah learning, in Hebrew, it's described by the one general word, yeshus. Yeshus means an exaggerated sense of self, and a sense of entitlement. And we have this in our DNA, that we have a sense of entitlement, a sense that, let's take some examples, simple examples. Road rage. Road rage, when you think about road rage, honestly, if you think about it logically, you're in a line of traffic and somebody pushes in, right? And it's infuriating. Why is it infuriating? We'll analyze this together in a minute, but it's infuriating. What's being ruffled is your yeshus. It's your space. He's stealing your space. The Rebbe Rashab explains that this whole concept of baseless hatred, causeless hatred, is a theft of your perceived right to space. So, just like in the example of road rage, let's go back to that. If you ask yourself really, sincerely, okay, my house is in Bellevue Hill, my office is in Haymarket, It takes me 25 minutes to get home. This guy who's pushing in is going to make a 35-second difference to my trip home. Right? Really? 35-second difference, or a minute difference. Let's say it's a minute difference. Let's say it's 3 minutes difference. It's not more. And you are ready to kill. Well, some people are, many people are, not everybody's ready to kill, but most people feel very irritated. Why do they feel so irritated? Because they don't really care about the 3 minutes. What they care about is that their space, they've been squeezed out of what they perceive to be rightfully their space. And this is not a physical thing. This is an emotional, spiritual thing. Rev Rashab explains that this notion of space comes from a feeling of entitlement of one's ego, which occupies the space. Now, we'll come to this in a minute, maybe, or maybe we should deal with it right now. This is delegatable. This ownership of space is delegatable. I'll give you an example. I'm giving the shir at the moment. So everybody in the shir, usually 1 million plus of men, are prepared to delegate this hour to me talking. Right? If one of you just started to talk, picked up his phone, made a phone call and started to talk and disturbed everybody, everybody'd be very upset. Mm-hmm. Why are they upset? Because the space that they own and have rented to me for an hour on license is being violated by somebody else. Right? And then you hate that person. And the reasons that you hate the person come later. This is a very important addendum to what we're talking about. You then give that hatred reason. He's loud, he's noisy, he's selfish. I hate his tie. How can he come here? How can he come here in an open neck shirt? How can he come here in shorts? Right? He's here in shorts and bare feet. If he was here in shorts and bare feet and shut up, you wouldn't object to it. But if he's in shorts and bare feet and he's noisy and he's taking up the space, now you hate his shorts and bare feet. Right. So this is a very, very deep and important truth about each and every one of us. That the causeless hatred, first of all, it is causeless because there's nothing about the person themselves that you're hating. You're not really hating that person. You're hating the fact that that person is stealing your space. And why do you hate the person for stealing your space? Because of your yeshus. So we have that famous story that in Chabad that with the Maharash, where the guy who comes to the Maharash in his shul and he complains that everybody is always treading on his toes. And the Maharash says to him that he suggests that he should make his feet smaller. Now you have to, there's a very deep answer. He's got to make his feet smaller. Why? He's taking up too much space. And he objects to the fact that people are punishing him for that. So the Rebbe Rashab Rashab explains to him that he has to make his feet smaller. When somebody is taking up too much space and it offends you, why does it offend you? It offends your ego. I'll give you an example. You come to a dinner party. Sitting at a dinner party and this guy comes in and he takes up the room. You know what this is like. He sits next to you. He talks all the time. You can't get a word in. He's talking to your wife, he's talking to his wife, he's talking to the wife across the road, he's boasting about his car.
You don't want to be near him.
Your money, and he's eating with his hands and his feet, and you're looking at him eating with his hands and his feet, and he's finished his wine, so he says, "You don't mind, do you?" And he takes your wine and slurps some of your wine, and you feel shalom aleichem.
Well, yeah, sure.
Have a seat. And he's eating and he's drinking and he takes your wine and he slurps your wine. You don't mind, and do you mind? You mind. Why do you mind? Because he's stealing your space. He's stealing the space that he believes. Sorry, that you believe is rightfully yours, and this man is trampling on your space. So you don't know anything about his kindness. You don't know anything about the mitzvahs that he does. You don't know what sort of a father he is. You don't know what sort of a husband he is. You know one thing, that he is taking your space and you can't have it and you therefore hate him. Now, what's the remedy? There are two remedies. You can tell him off. You can tell him, you're a pig, you'd behave like a pig, you're selfish, you know what, he'll hate you now. That's all that's happened. More period, more division. But if you analyze why you're objecting to this, what do you care? You're here for you're here for the next hour, and you get some more wine. There's more wine. There's more wine on the table.
You better be whiskey.
But really, so he is loud. So he is more attractive. So his stories are better. So he's taking up more. So what? If you understand and analyze that and undo the yeshus involved, all of a sudden the period's gone. And when the period's gone, the causeless hatred goes. And you don't hate him anymore. You only hated him while he was pinching your feet, treading on your toes. Make your toes smaller, you don't hate him anymore. Now, this is true at all levels amongst Am Yisrael, in all levels of our society. We have groups. We have the Haredi in Israel, who will fight with the left wing. This one will criticize this one will criticize that. What are they really? When the Rebbe was before Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe was a beacon of light, and in Chabad we thought he was the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. You should know there were great Gedolei Yisrael that criticized the Rebbe. Now, how could they criticize the Rebbe? How? If you're telling me that they criticized the Rebbe over Torah, that's impossible, because both of them were Baki in Torah. Right? It's not that one was more clever than the other one. But what's the problem? The problem was that at some level, not the level that you and I have, but Gedolei Yisrael are human, and at some level, there's a level of yeshus. And that level of yeshus is offended by the fact that he's a bit more important at the moment. I mean, a cruder word for it is jealousy at a lower level. But jealousy is a very crude and low level. There are many highly sophisticated, intelligent, finely people with fine midos who carry this clipper of Midian of siras ginom, of causeless hatred. And that causeless hatred is caused, the Rebbe is explaining, through yeshus. It's not because of anything about that person other than the fact that he is contracting your space, contracting what you believe you're entitled to. So the question then becomes, what are you entitled to? That's the question. And if what you're entitled to can be shrunk to, with the term which we use of bittul bittel's also hard to translate.
Humility.
Because it doesn't mean that you should be a doormat. Bittul means this, that let's pretend that somebody is a fantastic mathematician. He's not obliged to think that he's stupid at maths. That's not what bittul means. Bittul means he knows that he's a fantastic mathematician, but he understands that that's a gift from Hashem, and that somebody else with that capability may do much worse, may do much better than he is doing with what he's done. That's bittul. Bittul is, Moshe Rabbeinu knew he was the best man for the job. You can't tell me that the Rebbe didn't think that the Rebbe was a powerhouse. But the Rebbe had bittul, and Moshe Rabbeinu had bittul. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest onov that ever existed, right? The most humble man that ever existed. What does that mean? He thought that he didn't really talk to God, that he didn't really free Am Yisrael from Yitzias Mitzrayim, that he didn't really make water come out of a rock. He knew all of that. So why was he such an onov? Because he understood that if Hashem had empowered somebody else in the same way as he empowered Moshe Rabbeinu, they may do much better with the power that they were empowered with. That's what bittul means. So this baseless hatred, which comes from sinas chinom, doesn't imply or entail, that person's hurting you. He's not stealing from you. He's not murdering you. He's not doing you any harm. All he's doing, all in inverted commas, what he's doing is taking your space. And that engenders sinas chinom. You can't tolerate him. The moment you're confronted with this, you're confronted with somebody that you can't tolerate, that you scorn, that all of a sudden his achievements you minimize. You minimize his achievements. The guy's a famous violinist. He's one of the world's top violinists. But he comes to dinner and you don't get to speak, you don't get to see, you don't get to think. He takes up the whole room. Everybody's listening to him and nobody listens to Kremnizer. Oh, Kremnizer all of a sudden, now he begrudges him his talent. He doesn't say he hasn't got the talent, but he begrudges it. He deprecates it. For what? I mean, there are Gedolei Yisrael that people will walk in the street, people who can't begin to know the Torah that's on that man's toenail, and they'll criticize him. Why are they criticizing him? They're criticizing him because at some level or another, this is the clipper that's flourishing, and it has some very far-reaching effects. For example, if this man is at the dinner party on Thursday night, and Friday there's a levaya of somebody in his family, and you go to the levaya and he's suffering, it's very difficult to share in his suffering, because you've already got to the point where you're hating him out of sinas chinom, and that's coming from your yeshus. It's very hard to get past that. So you don't share in his sorrow, and you know what? You don't share in his simchas. He announces that he's wanting to marry off his daughter, and everybody's wishing him mazel tov, and you even if you go through the motions of wishing him mazel tov, you don't mean it in your heart. You begrudge him the fact that he's marrying off. So how far is this from where we started with the mitzvah ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? Now, I want to talk at a practical level about a couple of. So, what are the remedies for this? What's the remedy for causeless hatred? First of all, you have to shrink your space. How do you do that? So, our Rebbe, what we've done is Alter Rebbe, and we've done Rebbe Rashab, but our Rebbe has a constant stream of Torah which explains this, that the way out of yeshus is to remove the focus from yourself and put it on other people. In other words, instead of worrying about your welfare all the time and what you need and what you're entitled to and what you deserve and what is part of your space, go out and help another Jew. Go out and give another Jew some money, give it some comfort, give him some strength, give him some, help him with his loneliness, help him. Go out and help him. And the more you help another person, the Rebbe explains there's a magical transition that happens. You stop thinking as much about yourself and you move that. I'll tell you a fascinating thing that it's not very common knowledge. You know, in the, I think it was the 70s, I'm not sure of the dates here, but I'm sure all of you are familiar with the astronomical theories. I mean, what do I know about? I know the most superficial level of black holes. You've all heard of black holes. Yeah. Black holes are, as I understand it, a density of matter that is so dense that its gravitational pull is so enormous that there is no light that that doesn't get pulled in. And so what's the result is a black hole. Now there was a man, I think he died, I'm not sure, but I'm 80, Baruch Hashem, and he was 10 years older than me, so if he's not dead yet, nearly. He's a very famous chassid, very clever man, scientist. His name was Professor Branova.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of him?
Yeah.
A Russian, right?
Yeah.
So Professor Branova was very, very close to the Rebbe, and when they discovered the black holes, he hit us with the Rebbe, and he wanted to explain to the Rebbe what black holes were. And the Rebbe said that he would save his time, and because he understood what they were. But what practical result was there? So Branova was going to be giving a lecture that week on something to do with. He was very good with solar heating. He was. So the Rebbe stopped him and gave him a big smile and he said, "You're going to give this lecture. May I suggest a pathway for your lecture?" He said, "that since you understand black holes and since you understand solar energy," the Rebbe said, "explain to the people that you're speaking to that there are two dynamics that we live with. One is like the sun, that's giving off light and heat and energy, and one is like the black hole that's sucking up the heat and the light and the energy. And both are necessary, both are God's creations, right? But they need to work together. So you're not being asked, I'm not being asked to be a fool, and that if a man is going to be wanting to kill you, you've got to pretend that this is your yeshus. That's the seven nations of that we had to eradicate when we entered Eretz Canaan to make it Eretz Yisrael. These are 7 specific areas of evil. But the general clipper of Midian is the clipper of Pirud and Sinas Hinnom, which comes from Yeshus. And like on the 3rd day, Hashem says Ki Toiv twice. Why? Because the division of the 2nd day is rationalized into a unity, into a one whole. So too, with what the Rebbe was saying is you have light and heat, you have dark and cold, but you need to meld them. You've got to be able to work those two things together so that they live in peace. And if they live in peace, then you have harmony. When you have harmony, you don't have purity. You don't have division, for its own sake. So the answer to this level of yeshus is to stop thinking about yourself so much and concentrate on how you can practically, in a practical way, help another Jew. And the more you think about yourself, the more the spiritual gym requires you to do the exercises of stopping thinking about yourself and think about somebody else instead. You know, I'll tell you a story about with two genuine people. These are real names. In the early years of the Rebbe's Nasias, I don't remember whether it was the 60s or maybe late 60s, there was a Russian, the Lipska family, a very multiple family in Chabad, and this woman whose name was Tybal Lipska came to Crown Heights, escaped Russia, and with her husband, she ultimately had 10 children, and those children now have grandchildren. This story is told by one of the grandchildren. And she went to the Rebbe for Yechidus in the early days, where there was proper Yechidus, and she explained to the Rebbe that with all the trauma that she had from Russia, and how they nearly starved, and how they had to get false passports, and they had to live like in terrible conditions, that she was depressed. She was very anxious about communists coming to get them, and very fearful, and she was depressed, very depressed. So I don't know how the Rebbe knew, but she loved to dance. This woman loved to dance. You heard this story? So the Rebbe said to her, what you should do is go to every wedding you can. Now in Crown Heights there was a wedding every night, but there still is, right? Go to every wedding that you can and dance. Dance and dance. So she says, okay, so, and she went, and she's a holy Jew, and she had a Rebbe and listened to the Rebbe. So she went, and she started to go, and she started to dance, and she danced like a dervish, you know, danced and danced and danced all night, and she got better and better. And then this story is told by one of the grandchildren who married a girl called Richie Deitch, and Richie Deitch was a very shy girl, and she was invited to one of these weddings. And she was a wallflower, sitting in the corner. She didn't want to get up. She didn't want to. And this Mrs. Lipska sees her sitting there, and she goes over to her, and with a grip of iron, she picks her up, and she makes her dance. And she makes her dance and dance and dance. And this girl is dancing with her all night, round and round and round and round the color and the chosin, the color, and dances with her all night. And the girl testifies to this day that it was the best day of her life, this girl. Who was so shy, she was too shy to dance. And this Mrs. Lipska finished the depression. Slowly but surely, she stopped the anxiety, she stopped the depression. And okay, the Rebbe gave her the lavush, gave her the garment of dancing, which is something she loved. But fundamentally, the focus went from her to other people in the room, to make the color happy, to dance with people and to make them happy. So the antidote to this yeshus is to unpack oneself and go out and find other people to relate to help. Not to relate to help. So we're about to enter Elul. Elul, we're going to make a heshbon nefesh, we're going to make a spiritual balance sheet. The tshuva that we do in Elul is going to influence the brachas that we have Rosh Hashanah through the Aseret Yomei Tshuva to Yom Kippur. This is the Geula of this year's Golis for the last months of us being out there, doing our work, getting robbed, getting bashed, getting pushed around. And now we are in this process of, so the first and foremost and the most important thing that we all have for ourselves is, just like we begin the davening every day with the pasuk that we learned at the beginning of this year, so it is as we enter Elul that we have to understand what is the primary bad clipper that's kept us in Golus for thousands of years, when even Avodah Zarah was only Golus for 70 years. Huh? So it is this thing of sinas chinam. Sinas chinam is something we all feel. When do we feel it? When it's our yeshus that's requiring the space. How do you deal with that? You understand where you are, you stop, you take stock, and you say, instead of doing this, how can I go and help another person? Helping another person clears that pathway. So let's hope we can all do it. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Simple question.
Yes.
If you've got hatred towards someone which is not baseless,
No, that's different. Then he's got to pay you.